Okay, we are back in Exodus chapter 3. We are doing the second part of it, and I would like to connect from the previous session from verse 13. Now, in verse 13 is a very strange and interesting question. It says, Moses said to God, "Indeed, when I come to the children of Israel, and then I say to them, the Elohim of your fathers have sent me to you." Now, this is a very important thing. This is to tell the children of Israel in Egypt that it is the God of your fathers. Who is the God of your fathers? The God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. That's what it means by fathers. And so we're talking about the Elohim of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob have sent me. Now, the word send is to commission or to give a mission to Moses to undertake officially by God, someone that they don't see. That is going to be a tricky proposition by Moses to the people. And then Moses is just trying to think forward and says, "But they say to me, what is his name? What shall I say to them?" I think for the number of years that they were in Egypt, they would have heard of the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, but have never heard the name of God. And perhaps this is how Moses is anticipating, is not to, and I think this is probably also a Hebrew way of saying, who is this God? Because names, as I've highlighted there, is a very important concept. Names, like for the Chinese, names define the character, the description of who God is. And so what is his name basically is a question that says, who is this God? That's what the Hebrew mentality would be. It is not out of the blue asking, what is the name of God? It is with the intent of, who is this God that sent you to us? Who is this God? And this is the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Now, verse 14 is perhaps one of the most important verses in the Old Testament. The Old Testament tells us this, and God said to Moses, notice this, "I am who I am." And Elohim said, "Thus you shall say to the children of Israel, I am has sent me to you." Now, this is a big translation problem, I would say, before we move on to the rest of the chapter. "I am who I am" is how we have always traditionally read in the Bible. So let me just do a little chalk talk on this. The actual Hebrew word is and the transliteration or the way it's pronounced is this way. And let me just bring this concept to us. The Hebrew word reads from right to left. Okay, very, very important. It reads this way. Okay. And it reads Ehyeh, Asher, Ehyeh. Ehyeh, Asher, Ehyeh. Now, it has been commonly translated as "I am that I am." Now, this middle word here is "that." or which, and so on. So it's a connecting word. And here does not really mean I am, unfortunately. But this has been etched into our minds for the longest time, because when you read the English translation, that's what it says. Let me just give you an example. This is a Hebrew word, right? Now, let me just use a Chinese word and then you will see. We have this word, and this word means forest. But it is also a surname of a Chinese surname, Lim, right? And what happens is this. If we use a translation, we will call him Mr. Forest or Mr. Trees. But we never do that. Why? Because that we use the pronunciation would be lean, right? And so he's Mr. Lim to us. We never call him Mr. Forest. Why? Although we know the meaning, a name is by the sound. And so in Hebrew, we never say I am. It is Ehyeh, Asher Ehyeh. And so I just want to point out to you that I think we would be in trouble trying to just do a translation of the Hebrew. It would be equivalent of us calling somebody forest where he is limb, right? So understanding that there is a meaning behind the word, but it is always since it's a name, it must be pronounced the way it was originally pronounced, okay? So now let me just get back to this name. This name has these meanings. It means, Ehyeh means I exist, right? It is in the present tense, I exist. And certainly I am is a possible translation. It's just a translation. I will be, right? And I continue to exist. And it's very much about life. So I live. All of these are equivalent, but there is no one word that says, that must be it. So it must be I am. That's not the right way of looking at a foreign word like Ehyeh. So this word here and this word here is identical. So it can be I exist because, right? It could be because or for. I exist because I exist. I exist for I will continue to exist. I live and I will keep living. And that's that kind of an expression that it describes an ever-living God. All right? Now, one of the things that we seldom talk about is how does the Hebrew people look at this particular word. We always look at what the English people think. And since we are here on the path of learning the Hebrew a little bit, Ehyeh, Asher, Ehyeh actually brings a phrase, a Hebrew phrase, that sounds something like this. Let me just write it on the screen. It would be Yihyeh, and then Hova Haya. And let me just write the words down. It's Yihyeh, Hova, and Haya. Now, it may sound foreign to you, but I wanted to impress upon all of us It's because this is how this Ehyeh brings the concept. And this is what it means. It means he who will be. This is he who is. And then you can guess this, he who was. So who was, who is, who will be. And it describes the concept of an ever-living God. The God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob is an ever-living God. And so we would actually have these words here. And once you have these 4 characters, we would have a new name, that is Yod-He Vav-He. And that's Jehovah. And Jehovah, or in the Chinese, it would be Yehovah, is the pronunciation that we at best guess, right, of the name of God that comes from this word and this phrase, Yehovah Haya. Yehovah Haya. And it comes from a base word of life. That is the meaning of God's name. He who will be, he who is, and he who was. So from the past, present, and future, he always will be. He exists and he is life, and he's a life giver. That is the name that God gave to Moses. So let's come back to this phrase. He says, I am who I am. Yehovah Haya. He who will be, he who is, and he who was. Unfortunately, this I am who I am is there. We should just take it out of our memory because that's not how we would say it. Just like we say Lin Ziguang, it would be Lim Chi Guang. And it would always be Lim Chi Guang. It won't be forest, lightness, and brightness. We never call somebody that way, right? And so this is what it says. Thus you shall say to the children of Israel, Ehyeh has sent me. And that is the name. Ehyeh has sent me. I am has no meaning because it is just a construct, a part of a sentence. And so God continues to say, moreover, God said to Moshe, thus you shall say to the children of Israel, the Lord God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob has sent me to you. This is my name forever, for a long time, and my memorial to all generations. But we have missed this in the English. This is the Yod-He Vav-He. And this is Jehovah. Yod-He Vav-He. All right? Yod-He Vav-He. And this is this word here. The Yehovah Elohim of your fathers. The Elohim of Abraham, the Elohim of Isaac, Elohim of Yaakov has sent me to you. This is my Shem forever, my memorial to all generations. And this is the name of God. The Lord God in English, which doesn't mean anything to us, but it is Yehovah Elohim. And the word Yehovah comes from this Ehyeh, which is Yehovah Haya, that we get these initials. And so this is the name of God that is now presented to the children of Israel. This is the living God who is coming to you, who was with your fathers and now with you. So go, gather the elders of the Israel together, Now understand this. Elders of Israel are not just appointed people. They are from each tribe of the 12 tribes of Israel. They are the ones who represent the tribes. Of course, they are also the elderly. They are more senior, but they are the wisest of their tribes. And say to them, Yehovah Elohim of your fathers, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, appeared to me, showed himself to me, saying this, I have surely visited you and seen what is done to you in Mizraim, in Egypt. And I have said, I will bring you up out of the affliction of Egypt to the land of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, the Jebusites, to a land flowing with milk and honey. This was the promise given to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, starting from Genesis chapter 15. And so God says, after 4 generations, when the sins of the Amorites are full, God will come to them. And this is the place in Mitzrayim. But more important are 2 descriptions. Bring you up. Remember, Mitzrayim or Egypt is lower than Canaan. So Jacob always went down to Egypt. Now God will bring them up to Canaan. Number 2, a land flowing with milk and honey. These are 2 things that just don't pop out of nature. So this is a description of the fertility of the land. That is a land where there's lots of grass, and for your goats and for your sheep and for your cows, they will be fertile, lots to eat, and they will produce milk that's flowing out. And today we also see the cows of Israel, they produce the most milk per cow around the world. Honey, the bees make honey, and they will always come from flowers. And there will be lots of flowers, and there will be so much honey that it actually drips down, like the story that David says, right? It just flows down to the land, and that would be honey. And so that is the kind of richness of land that God will bring them to, very different from Egypt. Verse 18, then they will heed your voice, and you shall come, you and the elders of Israel, to the king of Egypt, that is Paroah, right? Pharaoh. And you shall say to him, the Lord God, Yehovah Elohim of the Hebrews. Why Hebrews? That's a good question to ask. Why not Jews? Because Jews is from the tribe of Judah. Hebrews is from the lineage of Eber. Eber are the Hebrews that comes across the Euphrates, has met with us, and now please let us go 3 days journey into the wilderness that we may sacrifice to the Lord our God. Remember, this is a time where there was no 10 commandments, there was no law of Moses. It is instructed to God because sacrifice to God is a common thing that since the days of Cain and Abel, they have been making sacrifice to God. And then Noah, when he comes out of the ark, he made a burnt offering, a sacrifice to God. And they have been making sacrifices to God in Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Now, after 400 years, God tells these people, go and see Pharaoh, that you will go to the wilderness to offer a sacrifice to God. So sacrifice is an acknowledgement of the living God of these people, the children of Israel. So we are still calling them the children of Israel because they are not a nation yet. They are still from the family of Israel or Jacob. That's the other name for Jacob, is Israel. And from the 12 sons, we have the 12 tribes. So we are now at a time where the family of Jacob or Israel went down to Egypt, and now they are about to leave Egypt, But now they are 12 tribes, not 12 families. They are now tribes and clans. Verse 19. After you and the elders go and see Pharaoh. This is the prediction God is telling Moses. And I'm sure you would see that this is not a surprise. But I am sure that the king of Egypt will not let you go. No, not even by a mighty hand. What does it mean? Not even when somebody shows power and supernatural miracles. Not by a mighty hand. So God says, see, God will do this. I will stretch out my hand and strike Egypt with all my wonders, which I will do in the midst. And after that, he will let you go. Now, look at this verse. Verse 20. God is saying that I will do my wonders. And these wonders are supernatural events. And it's in the plural, right? And there will be many of them. And the purpose of this is to strike at Egypt. So verse 20, when it says to strike at Egypt, it is to hit at Egypt, to attack Egypt, to conquer Egypt, to chastise Egypt, to punish Egypt, but more importantly, to put a judgment on Egypt. So all these miracles that God did, and later we would see, it is a judgment against Egypt who oppress God's people to teach them one very important lesson. And the lesson is God of Egypt is a living God. And the God of Israel is a living God. The God of Egypt is nothing. And this is what God will do. And after all these, he will let you go. And that is God's prediction. Initially, he won't, but God will do a series of these wonders. And by wonders, these are all supernatural events. These are miracles, right? So let me write this down. These are miracles. Now, what do we call a miracle? A miracle is something that we cannot explain. It's very real, very powerful, and only a supernatural God can do that. And no God of Egypt can. Right? That's the wonder that God is going to show. And God is going to be the one doing it. And so verse 21, and I will give this people favor in the sight of the Egyptians. Who is this people? The sons of Israel. And this was already predicted in Genesis chapter 15. What is the favor? It means that it will come upon a time when you go, when the time comes for you to leave, you shall not go empty-handed. What does that mean? Well, it means the opposite. The word not empty-handed means you will go and leave Egypt with hands full. Verse 22, every woman shall ask of her neighbor, namely, her who dwells near her house, the Egyptians. Ask them of what? Silver, gold, cloth, and you shall put them on your sons and on your daughters, and you shall plunder the Egyptians. Understand this word, plunder. The word plunder is to strip them off, strip them, right? It is to take spoil. You know, when in the old days, when you go to war and when you fight, and when you win the war, you take all the goods, and that's called plunder. And in this case, the war will be won by God, showing all the miracles, and the Israelites will leave Egypt and take the spoils, right? The spoils will be the goods of Egypt, like they have won the war. In this case, it will be silver, gold, and cloth. And these are the things that is worth something because there is a purpose in the wilderness. You see, God doesn't do anything without planning. God knows when he does one thing, how Pharaoh will react. And so this is to give Moses a heads up that this mission that Moses is going to undertake first have to understand that the God of Israel, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob is Jehovah, the Yihye Hove Haya, the Asher. I'm giving you these Hebrew names because to tell you that they are Hebrew names, right? Moshe is Moses. We don't call him one out of the reeds, right? Taken out of the water. That is the meaning. So limb is not forest. Same with the name of God. And so it would be wise for us to then refer to the Hebrew name rather than an English translation of the name called I am, which has no meaning. All right. And so with this, we end chapter 3 of Exodus. Any questions? Question now is about Hebrew and Jews. What's the difference between Hebrew and Jews? Now, Hebrew comes from the lineage of Eber or Eber. That would be Shem's line. And from Eber, it will go all the way down to Abraham. And Eber is this word, Hebrew. The people of Eber, the people who crossed the river to the other side, are Hebrew. So all these people from here downwards are called Hebrews. Okay? They are Hebrew people. So, family of Eber. Now, Isaac and Jacob. So Jacob is also called Israel, right? Israel. And he has 12 sons. One of the 12 sons, I think son number 4 is Judah. And the people of Judah are called Jews. However, if you recall, after Solomon, the kingdom of Israel was split into north and south. And the southern kingdom is also called the kingdom of Judah. So the people who live in the kingdom of Judah are also called Jews. So this is tribe and this is citizen. And so at the time of Jesus, all the people there are called Jews, including people who are not from Judah. Let me give you an example. The southern kingdom will comprise of Judah, Benjamin, and then there are a lot of Levites who stayed there because of the temple. But at the time of Jesus, we also have the Idumeans, the Edomites, who were forced to be Jews because John Hyrcanus, that we read from history, told the Idumeans, the Edomites from Esau, saying that if you want to live with them, you just need to become Jews, embrace Judaism, get circumcised, and now they are also called Jews. But they are not really Jews. So now you understand that the word Jews today are a generic name given to all those people who live in the state of Israel. And so one of the challenges that we have is that the word Jew has been widely used, broadly used, and we must always look at the context of how it's used. So at this point in time, they are the sons of Israel, the Hebrews, the Hebrew people. And so you remember Moses is a Hebrew, and Moses is distinguished from the Egyptians in chapter 2, right, where he killed an Egyptian and then he tried to judge the Hebrews. So he is known as a Hebrew at that point in time.
According to the history, what we read later on about the 10 plagues that the Pharaoh suffered, it looks like actually God is prepared, according to just now what we read, God is prepared that he is going to be stubborn.
Correct. Actually, when you look at why God is so sure that Pharaoh is going to be stubborn, I think if you sit down and analyze the entire story of Exodus, you will also realize that Pharaoh will definitely going to be stubborn. Why? Because you need to understand that Pharaoh is number one over the land and nobody tells him what to do. So you need to go back and remember the story of Pharaoh and Joseph. That Pharaoh is truly the number one of the land. Not only that, Pharaoh has morphed into the god of the land, the god of life. And so when we get to the point where his son died, that would be a slap on his face. But essentially, we must appreciate that Pharaoh is God to the Egyptians. And nobody, that Pharaoh bows down to nobody, basically. Right? And only everybody else bows down to Pharaoh. Now, to go and tell Pharaoh to let the Hebrews go is to slap him in the face. And what do you think Pharaoh would say? Go ahead? Absolutely not. No, Pharaoh would say, over my dead body. But then, as God demonstrated his power, so God says he will show a series of powers, but at the end of the miracles, he will let you go. But when you go, what is the other sign? You can ask all these silver, gold, and cloth, and they will give you, because they have lost the war to the God of Israel. And that would be the sign. Now, I will tell you this much. If we were there in Exodus chapter 3, I don't think we will believe that as well. Because we are now living in a time where Pharaoh is number one. Who is Moses to go and say all these things? And we will see that in chapter 4. Moses gets cold feet. This is a very critical stage of Exodus, but the name of God is what I want to impress you. So go back, if you have any questions, go back and watch the video again so that you know that the Hebrew name is what is important. Just like Chinese names, we don't call the Chinese names by the translation of our names. We still call our Chinese names the Chinese pronunciation of the names. Just like a Hebrew name, we call the Hebrew name by the Hebrew pronunciation of the name. But behind it, we would then be wise to know what the name actually means. Okay? And this is about the name of God.
Actually, it's because we don't understand
Correct.
the Hebrew words.
We have always been reading English. So we think that God's name is an English name, but it's not.
It will be just like the Malays or the Europeans reading Chinese names.
Correct.
They will read the word as it's pronounced,
Correct.
but they don't understand the wording behind.
Correct. You see, in all our lives, when we talk about a name of our friends, a foreign name, we never translate his name. For some reason, the English Bible went to translate God's name. And I tell you, the Jews will flip. That's why when you read our English Bible, I say, how can you translate God's name? It's like us, when people call us by our translatable name, the meaning of the name, and we will not accept it. You need to call me by my name, right? So that's the problem we have. So I just want to impress on us to understand the sacredness of God's name that the Jews hold, and also the pronunciation, so that we too can understand. It's Ehyeh, Asher, Ehyeh. So it's Ehyeh who sent you. And Ehyeh, Asher, Ehyeh gives us the Hebrew phrase, Yihye Hove Haya. He who will be, he who is, and he who was. So that we understand that the meaning is that our God is the ever living God. That's the picture that we will get. All right? Okay. I'll see you next week.